Okay, I think we'll look to make a start. First of all, thanks for joining this evening. Thanks for giving up some time for what's going to be called our grass pitch improvement webinar tonight. Hopefully the hat-trick of storms we've had over the last week or so hasn't caused too much disruption in amongst your kind of respective clubs and organisations, and hopefully tonight will provide some good insight for you in terms of grass pitch improvement, some information around PitchPower, the latest strategy really, and what support's available around grass pitch improvement, and then specifically look at some stuff around end of season renovations. Just some introductions before we kick off. I know a lot of people on the call and recognise a lot of the names that have come through and signed up. So hello to you all. Just for those that don't know me, my name's Nick Emery. I'm the Head of Development and Investment at Essex FA. So I work very closely with the Football Foundation, colleagues at the Football Foundation and the Grounds Management Association in trying to improve grassroots football facilities across Essex. Also on the call is my colleague Carl Sear, our Football Development Manager, is just helping to facilitate the call tonight. Julian Morris is going to be leading the presentation tonight, and the workshop is from the Grounds Management Association. I'll let Julian kind of give himself a little bit of background when it comes to his role. And also on the call we've got Chris Russell, who's one of our support pitch advisors, who is doing a little bit of work for us locally in supporting clubs around PitchPower. So we're aiming to do maybe about an hour tonight. It is being recorded so that we can upload it to our YouTube channel for those that couldn't make the call tonight. So hopefully that's okay with everyone. We encourage you to use the chat function. So the speech bubble at the top on your toolbar, you can ask questions in that box. And then there'll be a natural break probably just at the end of sort of the PitchPower section where people can unmute themselves and ask questions if they wish, and then same at the end of the workshop. So I hope that's okay. Fire any questions in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that, but I'll hand over to Julian to kick us off.
Evening everybody, thanks for giving up your time. Just to reiterate what Nick said, you just want to go on to the next slide please, Nick. Yeah, so this evening just wanted to sort of focus a little bit on PitchPower, introducing myself, some of the funding that's available, and just to sort of cover end of season renovations fairly briefly. We've obviously got a lot to get through. I'll do my level best to keep it to about an hour. Yeah, so if we can go to the next slide please, Nick. Yeah, so just to introduce myself first and foremost, so most of you on the call will know my colleague Phil Jago, who previously covered Essex as the regional pitch advisor for football. So our programme went through a restructure spring of last year, and Phil's moved into a cricket only role now, and I've gone into a football only role. So I now cover what is called Central East, which is Essex and 8 other counties. Just to talk a little bit about myself, so I'm Senior Regional Pitch Advisor, so I have the roles and responsibilities of the other regional pitch advisors in supporting, advising and training with clubs, organisations, local authorities, and supporting the governing bodies as well. But I also manage the Hive learning platform on behalf of the IPA team, creating the content for that, working on pilot projects like the work we're doing with local authorities, robotic mowers, and some of the other pilots that we've got going on. Previously covered football and cricket in the East Midlands region, so I've been involved with the programme since March 2018, so coming up to 4 years. And previously I worked in professional football for 10 years. So I was at Coventry City for just coming up to a decade, and I was head groundsman there for 5 years of that. And I've also been a grassroots volunteer for nearly 20 years. So some of that's been as a volunteer groundsperson, some of that's been as a secretary, treasurer. So I've kind of seen it from all angles in terms of grassroots. So next slide, please, Nick. So I thought first and foremost I'd talk a little bit about what the pitch advisory service is and how it's structured and how it works. Next slide, please, Nick. So the pitch advisory service, which was previously known as the Grounds and Natural Turf Improvement Programme, is a partnership between Sport England, the Football Foundation, Grounds Management Association, the England Cricket Board, the Football Association, Rugby Football League and Rugby Football Union. Basically, it's a programme that's number one goal is achieving sustainability and of quality natural grass pitches through education, training, working with volunteers and professional grounds managers, and through the funding that's available within football, the provision of specialist equipment and materials, and maintenance support as well. We are in the first phase of the pitch advisory service, but we're kind of in the third phase of this programme. So it launched in 2014 and it basically goes through in funding 3 yearly funding cycles. So the previous one from 2017 to 2021 was Grounds Management Association, previously known as the Institute of Groundsmanship, the Football Association, the ECB, and I'm glad to say we've had the two codes of rugby come on board for the next 3 years. And basically the programme sort of collaborates cross sport, works with all the local governing bodies, works with governing bodies at a national level, as well as work with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport and other partners. And basically we've all got this common goal of improving grass pitch stock across the country. Next slide, please. Yeah, there's just a little map there, so you can see there is myself and 5 other pitch advisor colleagues, and then Tom Rowley, who oversees the RPA team, who's key account manager for football. He really deals with the strategy with the governing bodies at a national level. And you can see my not so little patch there in red on the right hand side. Next slide, please. So yeah, so kicking off on what support is available. So I thought we'd start with that. I apologise to those that are on the funding streams and are aware of this, but I thought it'd be useful to give a quick introduction for those that aren't. So the Football Foundation's grass pitch improvement strategy is essentially a 10-year plan. We want to try and get 20,000 natural grass pitches up to the GMA good pitch standard by 2030. So the pitch gradings that we've got basically run in a pyramid from poor, basic, good, advanced and high. So the target is to get 20,000 pitches to the good standard by 2030. At the moment, about 1 in 3 pitches is at that number. So we've got a lot of work to do to get there. There are various avenues of funding available through the Football Foundation at the moment where grass pitches are concerned. The first of those is the Grass Pitch Maintenance Fund, which is a tapered 6-year grant, and depending on your eligibility and the grade that your pitch is allocated, you can access up to £2,500 for a full size 11v11 pitch, and then that tapers down dependent on pitch size, and it's 100% funded for the first 2 years and then tapers down over the years 3 to 6 with a contribution element from the people that the organisations and clubs that sign up to that. This particular grant can be used to either employ sports turf contractors to carry out specialist works for you. If you do have access to the equipment necessary yourselves, you can use that grant to purchase materials such as grass seed, fertiliser, etc. And you can use the grant towards the cost of purchasing a soil sampler to help you with your PitchPower inspections, which we'll come on to in a minute. And as it says there, the amount of funding available does depend on the PQS grade that your pitch receives through your PitchPower inspections. And essentially what we hope will happen with your PitchPower report is that it allows you to produce kind of your own maintenance schedules based on the recommendations that you get in your report, and essentially the grant's there to help you get your pitch to the good standard. That's why it's kind of front loaded with 100% funding year 1 and 2, because that hopefully gets you to the good standard, and then years 3 to 6 are to help you sustain or surpass that standard. And in terms of the other support that's available, there's also the Football Foundation small grant. So they cover all sorts of things from perimeter fencing to goalposts to portable floodlights. But one of the areas that it covers is pitch maintenance machinery and storage. So and storage containers. So you can get, if you are outside of the step system, you can get up to 75% towards the cost of equipment and storage containers. So if you have a ground where your equipment's a little bit tired and you think it might need replacing, or you're looking to supplement the maintenance of a parish council or a local authority or a third-party contractor, you'd like to do some of it yourself, those are discussions that we can have about equipping you with the machinery you need to support you with that. And if you are a club that is in the step system, then you can access the Football Stadium Improvement Fund, which won't help you at the moment with the maintenance elements of your pitch, but it will help you in terms of pitch maintenance machinery. And the one thing just to say there is that it is kind of team specific. So if you've got one pitch that is used by a step team, you won't necessarily be able to get equipment through small grants for that particular pitch if you've only a single pitch. But if you've got a single pitch plus a number of other pitches on site that are used for junior football or non-step system football, you can access small grants for those. So providing the equipment's going to be used across all pitches, you can access that. So it's 70% contribution through the Football Stadium Improvement Fund or 75% through the small grants, and the eligibility and the criteria vary a little bit across the two. Next slide, please. Nick might want to jump in and correct me on anything I've got wrong there.
All good. Just so people are aware, I've just popped it in the chat. I've put the link to the Football Foundation's website that takes you straight to the Grass Pitch Maintenance Funds section of that website, so people can have a look through that. I will send out some links as well as a follow-up email to everyone as well. There are a couple of clubs, I think, on the call tonight that have accessed the Grass Pitch Maintenance Fund, so perhaps when we have that natural break a little bit at the end of this section, if anyone wants to share either in the chat or unmute themselves and tell them about their experience of the Grass Pitch Maintenance Funds, because I know we've seen some really positive results of the clubs that have been able to access that in terms of pitch improvement.
Yeah, so cheers, Nick. So just to touch a little bit on the considerations around the Grass Pitch Maintenance Fund, it's essentially made available to support what we call enhanced maintenance works. So it can't be used to pay somebody to come in and cut your pitch for you or line mark your pitch, but we use it to do what we call the enhanced maintenance work. So that's things like overseeding, fertilising, verti draining your pitches, treating them for weeds, sand dressing, slitting, operations like that. So it's kind of it's beyond what we call the basic maintenance. So it's those operations that will help to take your pitch to the next level. For those that sign up to it, it is within the terms and conditions of your grant. You should be providing 2 PitchPower assessments annually, and the submission windows are one of a submission between the 1st of April and the 30th of June, or the 1st of July to the 31st of October. And then there is a mandatory submission between November the 1st and March 31st. The reason why we ask for that mandatory one is really the main point of this program really is for us to be trying to get pitches in this country to that good standard during the winter months when we're losing a lot of games and we're seeing a lot of cancellations. The last full football season we had in 2019, we lost 150,000 fixtures to cancellations through weather-related postponements and cancellations. So what we want to try and do is get those pitches to the good standard in the winter months. So we have that mandatory window to try and capture the quality of your pitches when in theory they're going to be at their worst. And yeah, as it kind of says there, it maps out at the bottom kind of how the funding is structured in terms of the partnership funding element of that. So it is a 6-year grant. What comes after year 6, I can't tell you at this stage. The funding and the support that's available, particularly the two we've spoken about this evening, have kind of been available for the last couple of years. So we've come a huge way in a short space of time in terms of the support that you can access. I don't envisage a situation where hopefully we're likely to go backwards with that 2030 target in mind. So hopefully it's a question of kind of getting you on this journey and continuing to be able to support you kind of 6 years and beyond that. Next slide, please, Nick. So just to touch really briefly on kind of one of my areas of responsibility and a really, really good resource if you are dipping your toe into grounds maintenance and wanting to sort of get a bit more of a feel for what it's all about. So we've got this online community. It's got nearly 3,000 users on there now. I need to update the slide a little bit. And it's essentially a kind of, think of it as a bit of a social media platform for grounds people and particularly volunteers. The vast majority of those 3,000 users are grassroots grounds people like yourself. And basically we have a forum on there where you can go on there and ask questions in the community support area. So if you've got a particular question or any concern with your ground, you can go on there and simply ask a question. As a commitment from myself and the other regional pitch advisors to get back to you, providing it doesn't get answered sufficiently by somebody else on the community. We've also, as regional pitch advisors, we have to be impartial. So I quite often get asked questions around what machine should I get, what's the best fertiliser, what's the best grass seed. And unfortunately, I can't say, even if I did have an opinion. So the Hive is a really good way to kind of get round as not being terribly helpful with that, where you can kind of go on there and get some answers from people who are in exactly the same situation as yourself. So going on there and asking questions if a particular piece of machinery is recommended in a report, or you're looking for materials to do your end of season works or whatever it might be, you can go to Hive Learning. It's completely free. It's basically just a email and a password to log in. And there's also the area that I spend quite a lot of my time working on is the technical resources area. So we've got what we call learning cards on there and videos that cover everything from mowing to how to apply fertilizer, to line marking a pitch from scratch, to repairing your goal mouths, pests and diseases, dealing with waterlogged pitches, pretty much anything you could imagine regards grass pitches and management of them. We've got a resource on there that talks you through that, and there are a number of the cards on there that come along with a video as well. So it's a really, really useful environment if you're not on there already. So I'd encourage you to have a look and sign up if you think that would be helpful. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, and just a little plug for the Grounds Management Association learning and training. So we do have, as well as the resources that we have available on the Hive Learning platform, we do have our more formal training at the GMA. We kind of offer everything from our level 1 training course, which is kind of the entry training for grassroots, all the way through to formal HND level qualifications for professionals. So we kind of have that suite there. But our online level 1, you can see a little bit there what that touches on, and you can do that in about half a day, and that's £35 starting at the level 1. And then our online courses run all the way through to a level 3 And if you are on a ground where you manage multi-sports, we do have those training courses across the various different sports as well. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, so on to PitchPower. So hopefully most of you will have heard or seen or had an email or whatever it might be about PitchPower over the last 18 months or so. So essentially it is a self-assessment app that allows you to self-assess your pitches, submit that information, and then get access to a bespoke report from myself or one of my colleagues. And basically the way that it works is through a combination of photographs that we ask you to take, information that we ask you to put in, and basically all you need is a camera phone, a spade and a tape measure. It's as simple as that. And you can see there, I think Nick's posted in the chat as well, you can go down and you follow that hyperlink. And if you put in pitchpower.org.uk, it will essentially take you through to the PitchPower login page, which is what you can see on that mobile screen there. And I'll invite you to create an account, again, completely free. Pop in your username, password, and then it will send you a verification email. And then you'll be able to log in. But essentially, it hasn't replaced, but it works alongside what regional pitch advisors used to do, where we used to travel to sites, carry out the performance quality standards testing ourselves, then go away and write a report. And to kind of put it into context, how much more support we're able to offer now we've got PitchPower. I think in 2019, I did 120 on-site inspections and reports. And that was, to be honest, killing myself. With PitchPower, I think in the last 12 months, we've probably completed somewhere in the region of 450. So we pretty much tripled the capacity of our advisors in terms of how quickly we can get advice out to you and how quickly you can access the funding that you need. We have got a commitment to turn around your reports within 21 days. Hopefully that's at the busiest times. We have been running to an average of 9 days across the board, but at times towards the end of those mandatory submission windows, when people tend to leave it last minute-ish, we probably be running a bit close to that 21-day time scale, but we're up to 2,900 reports completed across the country since PitchPower launched about 18 months ago. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, so that just touches a little bit on what I explained there. So it isn't a classic mobile app in terms of you can't go to your app store and download it. So you have to put the link into your mobile browser. Google Chrome works best, so we recommend Google Chrome. And essentially what you can then do once you launch the app is to save it to your home screen, so you can then access it like you would any other app that you download from an app store. And basically once you log in, you search for your organization, or you can add your organization if you haven't done before, and then it allows you to locate the ground that you maintain and then go from there. Next slide, please, Nick. There you go. So as it says there, the information that you kind of need to carry out your inspection is details of the maintenance equipment you currently use. It is quite useful to have information on what a contractor uses if possible, because it just helps to guide us towards the sort of recommendations that we make, because certain equipment might be more appropriate than others in a grassroots setting. Useful to have an idea of the annual budget you've got access to for maintenance and end of season renovations. A list of the kind of the standard maintenance activities that you carry out. So if you can give me an idea of the work that you're already doing and how frequently you're doing it, and obviously it gives me a a better idea of what we could be doing better or more of to, or introducing new things to kind of take the pitches to the next level. And if you have done any of the online training courses, or like tonight attended previous workshops, it gives you the opportunity to say that as well. And then the kind of really critical one is information on pitch cancellations and usage. So there are guidelines around the number of hours per week a natural grass pitch can take before it can reasonably be expected to decline in quality. So it's useful to know the hours of training and the hours of matches per week on average, and how many weather-related cancellations you've got. And really, we're talking about waterlogging there, so we can get an idea of that. Next slide, please, Nick. So yeah, so what makes for a good PitchPower report? So I suppose the main thing to say is that the more information that you can provide in your inspection, the more bespoke your report will be. Obviously, you can complete all of that information, or you can leave it completely blank. But the more information that you can provide and the more detail on your site, the more bespoke the report that you get will be in terms of the recommendations that I provide. And I've already kind of touched on a number of those points there. The other one as well is the accuracy of the images that you provide within PitchPower, making sure the grass height, the surface profile, the soil profile, and the line marking images are as they are in the guidance, and crucially unique to each pitch as well. And if you have got anything else that you don't think can be expressed through kind of the process of completing the app, you do have an additional information section. So if you wanted to give me information on a particular area of a pitch that you have trouble with, or you have damage from pest and disease, or vandalism, or whatever it might be, you can add that additional information in there. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, so this is a little bit of an example of what the equipment section looks like. So you can put in compact tractor, line marker, mower. You can tell me the make, the model, the year of manufacture, what sort of condition it's in. And the reason why that's really important is that the small grants applications are done on the basis of the machinery that's recommended in your PitchPower report. So if you're after pitch maintenance equipment and it hasn't been recommended in your report, rather than being able to go through the online full foundation process and apply for that machinery all online, you'll probably get one of the grant assessment managers come back to you and say, oh, you're going to have to get in touch with Julian and see if the machinery that you're after is appropriate. So it's really useful if you can, number one, tell me in your inspection that you're after equipment and what you're looking for, but also give me a good idea of what equipment you've got if you're maintaining the pitches yourself. Next page, please, Nick. Yeah, and to be honest, this is a little bit of a dream world in terms of a maintenance section. Not expecting anybody really realistically to complete it to this level, but it is worthwhile saying that with PitchPower, because it's accessible through a web browser, you can do the equipment, the maintenance, and all of the adding of pitches in your sites, etc., on a desktop. So I appreciate that it's really finicky to be putting in all this text via a mobile device. You can actually do everything apart from the actual pitch inspections from the comfort of your own home. So all you've got left to do when you travel to site is to do the actual inspections. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, I don't know if this video playing it is probably a good example of kind of the guidance videos that are available in the app. Show you how to do the measurements properly. So the first one it asks you to do is how to measure the grass height. Not to worry, Nick, if it's not working.
He's not going to have it, mate.
No worries. So if you pop onto the next slide, and it'll just give you a picture example of how to do it. So you can see, first thing it asks you to do is how to measure the grass height, and you can see on that right hand side that there's a little blue hyperlink there. that says need help with this, watch the video. And basically for every measurement that we ask you to take, there's a guidance video where Tom Rowley himself is showing you how to do the picture as it should be. So as you can see here, it's a tape measure behind a spade, and basically it's measuring the average grass height. And with each inspection we ask, there's some text that gives you guidance on what we're looking for, and all you have to do is to take that photograph and put in the average grass length. It is worthwhile saying that if you do have any issues with mobile signal on your site, you can take all of these images in advance, and then when you click on the take a photo, if you click on my files on your mobile device, you can then upload them when you've got access to Wi-Fi, if that works better for you. Next slide, please, Nick. There you go. So this tells you how to take a picture of a surface profile. So the way that we measure this is basically 100 squares, and what we're looking for is the percentage of weed coverage, percentage of grass coverage, and how much is bare ground. So you don't need to worry too much if you're making an educated guess as to these figures, because we do review them at our end once your inspections come through to our reporting dashboard. So we do have the ability to override the measurements if we think that you're way off. But as you can see here, there's quite a bit of clover in this image. There's no bare ground really. There's a bit of grass cover. So we'd probably be, out of 100 squares, you maybe got sort of 40 to 45% weed coverage there, and probably 50 to 55% grass cover. So it's totaled out of 100 squares, and that's the way that we work it. Next slide, please, Nick. The next one is we ask you, and this is the one that's kind of a little bit more complicated. We ask you to measure the soil depth and the root depth. So the reason we do that is we want to gauge how much depth of kind of debris-free, stone-free soil you've got that is kind of hospitable to growing grass. And also we want to gauge how good your root depth is, because most of the nutrients and oxygen, etc., that gets taken up by the grass plant is within the soil. So the deeper and denser your root structure, the better your pitch is going to be. And again, you can click on the hyperlink to see a guidance video for that. Next slide, please, Nick. Thatch, yeah, this is the one that's slightly tricky. Essentially, thatch is kind of a breakdown of roots, stems, nodes, and basically it creates a mat of material at the base of the grass in certain situations that can prevent fertilizer, oxygen, water getting through. So we try and measure that and gauge that, because that can be a big headache on grassroots pitches in certain situations, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to measure from an image. But again, we ask you to try and make a decent stab at how much thatch you've got, and it's basically a layer of material that sits kind of between the crown of the grass plant and the soil below. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, and then the last one in terms of the images that we ask you to take is a line markings one. PitchPower 2.0, as it's been imaginatively titled. It launches in the spring, and that's basically going to be an upgraded version of the current PitchPower app. And within that, we'll be asking you to provide us with a kind of a wide-angled image of pitch quality as a whole, rather than just kind of the snapshots that we get at the moment. But at the minute, this is a good opportunity to give us kind of a bit of a wide-angled shot of your pitch. So number one, we want to see what condition the line markings are in. So are they burnt in? Are they straight? Are they the right width, etc.? That's what we're looking at here. But it's also a good opportunity to kind of show us a bit more of your pitch as well. And then the last bit, please, Nick, is the additional information section. So that's the bit that I spoke about, that allows you to put in the cancellations, the training hours, the match hours. And I appreciate the training hours can vary quite a bit in a grassroots site between the summer months and the winter months. So if, for instance, you do no training in the winter, you might want to put your training hours in and just put in the additional info box. We only use the pitch for training in the summer. And we're just trying to capture kind of where there are pitches being overused, and that could be leading to its poor condition. And if you do share with another site like cricket, for example, that might impact certain maintenance practices. If you're sharing on a cricket outfield or whatever it might be, you just pop in the other sports on this pitch box. You can just pop that in there, and it gives you a drop down of a number of different sports, etc., that you can choose from. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, and this is basically just a breakdown of what measurements make a pitch grade. So I appreciate kind of when you get a PitchPower report through, you might be thinking, oh, well, my pitch has come out at basic. Why has it come out as that? And basically, every measurement that you put into your PitchPower inspection is scored. So it goes into an algorithm, which then at the end throws out the pitch grade based on the information that you've put in. So you can see here, for example, that at this time of year, your grass coverage has got to be meeting 71 to 80% for your pitch to qualify as good. So if you've got 30% of your area that's either bare ground or weed cover, then your pitch won't be able to attain a good standard pitch at this time of year. So useful to have a little, I'm sure Nick will send the slides around. It would be useful to have a little look at that to see where and why you might be sitting where you are in terms of the pitch grading. I think we're probably onto questions now, Nick, on the next slide on the back of this bit. Yeah. So if anybody's got any questions based on what I've been through before I kind of move on to end of season renovations, I appreciate it's a bit of a whistle stop, to all that.
Thanks, Julia. Paul Littleton, you think you've got your hand up? Do you want to unmute yourself? Come in.
I have. Thank you very much. We had a PitchPower inspection done last June by Brad. Daniel. He came down, done a very comprehensive report on all our sites. I've noticed via the app that it's asking me for another inspection. I have 38 days left. Does it run out then?
So basically, this is that mandatory window that I mentioned earlier. So everybody that's signed up to the funding is, as part of their term conditions, asked to do an inspection between 1st of November and the 31st of March. So the reason why it's saying 30 odd days left will be that end of March deadline. Beyond, it'll just basically what will happen is it will just roll over into the next window beyond that, where the measurements change. The tolerances and the measurements change slightly, obviously, for the time of year. So at this time of year, we're a little bit more lenient on certain measurements than we would be sort of at the start of the playing season. But yeah, really important to try and stick to those T's and C's if you can, because it gives us an idea. It's really just to help monitor your pitch and hopefully give you up-to-date advice.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Paul. Any other questions? There's nothing else that's come through on the chat. I did mention there's I don't know if Colin wants to come in and just give a little bit of feedback on the Grass Pitch Maintenance Fund. Colin Allen, he's able to.
Yeah, how you doing? Basically, this is my second year as the funding cycle. I have found it quite useful to have the funding, obviously from a non-profit making organisation over in Essex. Having just the support of the FA, or Football Foundation, should I say, and along with counties, has improved the pitches probably to a good standard of 75%. Obviously, we're still in the kind of development stage, obviously, of the second year due to COVID, obviously, with everybody else. But we have had the troubles at times with the recent weather over the past month or so, with the game should have been called off and they weren't. So that kind of affects their playing surface to a certain degree. But overall, I'm happy with the funding cycle we're getting. We'd always like more, but it's not sometimes feasible. But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks for that. I have posted. I will send all the links that I've been popping in the chat while Julian's been presenting. I'll send those out in a kind of collective email along with the slides tonight. I'll put them in a PDF so people can have access to them. But really, if you're not on PitchPower yet, can't kind of emphasise enough that PitchPower, regardless if you then want some funding, if you're a club playing within the National League system, you would still need to go down PitchPower to get funding through that route, or to explore funding through that route. And equally, you know, as a community grassroots club, through the grass pitch maintenance funding, that is going to be the starting point. You're going to need to have the PitchPower report done for your site. So all the self-help videos that are that I'll put in the link are really useful to have a look at and take your time to have a look through that. I already encourage you to get, if you can, 2 or 3 of you within the club that can do it. So you might do it as a bit of a team exercise as a starting point, just to upskill 2 or 3 people rather than it coming down to one person in case people move on. The GMA courses that Julian talked about, you know, the first one's online now, so it's well worth doing. Had lots of good feedback around that as well, particularly if you want to kind of find out a bit more around the basics of grass pitch maintenance funding. So I'll send all that out, you know, following this evening. But if there's no further questions at this stage, we'll crack on to the second part of the presentation, Julian. Thank you.
Great stuff. Yeah, so I mean, this could be an evening all of itself, really. But I would sort of want to try and do it justice in fairly brief terms. So we're obviously kind of approaching the back end of the season now. Probably doesn't feel that way after the months of what feels like rain and storms and waterlogging and getting blown away mostly. But we are approaching spring, believe it or not, and it's kind of now that we need, if we should have been, but if we haven't been, it's now that we really need to start thinking about what we're going to be doing to our pitches at the end of the season. So I've laid it out really into the areas that I would look at. So it's kind of preparing your pitch for the end of season work. It's then cleaning out the rubbish and the mess that's been in there from the season's play. It's decompacting your surface to help get some oxygen and decompaction into the soil and start to improve that soil condition after a year's play and compaction from machinery. It's trying to restore the evenness and the surface levels in any areas where you might have lost your levels a little bit or it's got worn, and then restoring the grass cover, growing that back in, and then looking at getting on top of any weeds that have crept into the pitch from kind of the beginning of spring, really. So we'll go on to the next slide, please, Nick. So the first thing I want to talk about really is kind of the preparation and how early is too early to be planning end of season renovations. Well, when I was in pro football, I'd pretty much be planning my next year's renovations as soon as the current ones had finished. It is the kind of the single opportunity in your year to set yourself up in the best way for your coming season. So a lot of how good your pitch is for the coming year will be determined by the work that you do in an end of season renovation process. And that starts really with some of the work that you can do to make it easier for yourself or for a contractor that's coming to do work for you. So gradually mowing your grass down to a shorter height will help to facilitate the renovation. So whether that is getting grass seed into your pitches, whether it's scarification, whether it's getting top dressing down into the surface, whatever it might be, you're getting your grass down to a little bit shorter and removing some of that top growth. It'll sort of open up the grass sward a little bit and just help to get those materials into the surface. between 15 and 20 millimeters is ideal if you possibly can. And it can be really helpful as well in terms of not losing line markings, etc. If you can kind of mark up any of those pitch corners. Certainly if you are fortunate enough to have any irrigation or drainage boxes or anything like that around your pitches, is just kind of getting them sprayed up with paint and making sure that they're clearly visible for anybody that might be coming in and doing work for you, or indeed volunteers within your club that might be doing work for yourselves. And it's also helpful to try and get a bit of a head start on any heavily worn areas. If you have got goal mouths that are getting a little bit dished, or penalty spots or centre spots that have got a little bit dished through erosion over the course of the season, it can be helpful just to sort of start to turn over those areas a little bit and get a bit of top dressing in there and start to do a little bit of work on those before you actually come to do your seeding and pitch renovations. Typically, it's common sense really, but the more worn an area is, the longer and harder it is to get it re-established. So the earlier you can kind of start that process, you'll help yourself. And if you are applying fertilizers, it can be really, really beneficial to try and get a soil analysis done, because basically that gives you an educated way of kind of planning out your fertilizer applications for the year. So particularly if your pitch is looking a bit yellow and a bit sorry for itself, early spring, March time is really the best time of year to do that, because it's kind of before you're making any applications of fertilizer, and it kind of gives us a real idea of kind of what the nutrient levels are in the soil. And I can help you to kind of make sense of a soil analysis. I normally kind of suggest that if you've got a material supplier or somebody that you buy fertilizer from, they're probably the best persons to try and get a soil analysis done by, and they'll either come out and do it for you, or more commonly now they kind of send you a testing kit, and basically they'll just sort of say, can you take a few samples of soil, pop it in a plastic bag, and send it off, and then it will come back with an analysis which will kind of tell you where your nutrient levels are at in your soil. And it can be it normally give you an indication of the pH of your soil as well, which can be important if well, for loads of reasons. But if you've got bad issues with worm casts, for example, it might be that you've got quite alkaline soils. Equally, if your turf health is quite poor, it might be that your soils are like overly acidic, or they could be overly alkaline. So it's just a really useful benchmark to get that done. And we sort of normally say, before you start making any spring applications of fertilizer, if you can do that, it's a really useful thing to have done. Next slide, please, Nick. So the first part of the renovation process, really, if we possibly can, and there are loads of variations of what we call scarification, and it really varies hugely dependent on budget, but it can be anything from dragging a spring rake across areas that are kind of heavily laden with moss or weeds or whatever it might be, to using a drag mat or a tractor mounted rake or chain harrows, even, to kind of disturb that matter and kind of try and clean it out from the bottom. And it can go from that all the way through to kind of tractor mounted scarifiers, like you can see in that top image, that basically kind of thin out the grass nicely and leave you kind of get rid of some of the rubbish, get rid of some of the organic matter in the surface and some of the weeds and undesirable grasses. And that probably really is going to be as far as most grassroots sites will go, unless they're kind of playing in the National Step League system. But then there is also the fairly relatively extreme option that you can see below that, which is kind of commonly known as corrowing off. So that's where the top 15 to 25 millimeters of the surface is completely removed, and basically we do that to kind of get rid of considerable thatch layers, undesirable grasses, weeds, etc. to kind of even out areas where there might be lumps and bumps. But we'd only ever really advocate that where there's comprehensive irrigation and a really robust maintenance and resources package to kind of grow that back in. So for most, a fairly light clean out is going to be appropriate. And obviously it's important to kind of bear in mind that the more you thin out your pitch, the more you're going to kind of need to reinstate it. So have a careful think about, have you got access to irrigation? Are you going to be applying fertiliser when you do your pitch renovations? How much time are you able to put in terms of maintenance to kind of reinstate your playing surface? So there's all those kind of factors and considerations. But like I said, scarification can kind of be as light touch or as comprehensive as it needs to be. But one of the things that we'd look at in your PitchPower inspection would kind of be, you know, how much of a need is there for scarification? How much can we see that you've got a lot of weed, what we call weed grasses? So there are certain types of grasses that we want for winter sports, which is perennial ryegrass, which is hard wearing, deep rooting, quick to recover. Unfortunately, in this country, we have a bit of a nemesis called annual meadow grass, which is our common weed grass that's really shallow rooting, dies back in the winter. And what we sometimes see at a grassroots level is a pitch that's got really good grass cover through the summer months because it's full of annual meadow grass that's really happy, then suddenly goes really threadbare in the winter because all that annual meadow grass dies back, and people are thinking, God, where's all my grass gone? And basically it's like an annual plant at home. It sort of dies back from year to year and then reseeds and comes back. So we want to try and get those perennial ryegrasses into your pitch to make that improvement long term. And as it says at the bottom there, the cleaner the finish from scarification, the better. So really trying to do that when the conditions are as dry as possible will help you to get a nice clean finish from that. And as it mentions, it's key that anything that you are cleaning out from the pitch is collected. So either a machine like at the top where you've got a hopper that collects the horizons, or if you're using a chain harrow or rake or whatever it might be, trying to have a ride-on mower, for instance, that's got a collection facility hopper on the back to collect that up or help with that process. Next slide, please, Nick. So next one we come on to, really, decompaction and aeration is probably only second to mowing and line marking in what I would term as being like the most important practice. So even more so than fertilisation, if you've got a little bit of budget, deep spiking would be the next thing I would be looking to do after you're doing your routine mowing and marking. And the reason being, as you can see on that picture at the top, we've got good structured soils there with lots of what we call large particles of soil. So you've got lots of space in that image on the left hand side for roots to move, for air to move, for water to move through that soil. And basically that's going to have a really healthy grass plant compared to the one on the right hand side where the soil structure is really, really tight. There's not much what we call pore space in there. And one of the real good things with deep spiking is that if you've never had it done before, basically it helps to get your roots traveling to greater depth, and it will also help your root density to improve. And what that does is it unlocks nutrients that are already in the soil that you probably never tapped into before. So I kind of almost look at it as free fertilizer, because basically you're accessing kind of all of the locked up nutrients in the soil. And I've seen it quite commonly where deep spiking has been done for the first time in the spring, and it looks as if the pitch has had fertilizer applied because it suddenly gets an increase in grass growth and the turf health improves a lot. And that's just simply because the deep spiking has enabled the grass plant to tap into a lot of nutrient underneath. It's also really key in terms of improving the penetration of water. So having a good soil structure will help to get water drain away, both from the surface but also through the soil profile. at a greater rate as well. It's not a silver bullet. You're not suddenly going to go from a pitch that's dreadful and waterlogged most winters to one that sort of drains like Wembley just because you've banged a deep spiker through it. But over time, like most of these practices, it will help to improve your soil structure, and it will help to improve the drainage and the turf health, as I said. So I would advocate absolutely having that done as part of your end of season renovation works. And if you can afford to get it done twice, you probably want to do it spring and autumn. If you can only afford to do it once, then probably do it in autumn time. Next slide, please, Nick. So restoring evenness. So we're talking about kind of top dressing here. And this can vary anything from applying some top dressing in a goal mouth with a pan shovel by hand and introducing some grass seed and try and sort of bring a goal mouth back, or it can be sand spreading over a whole pitch. Over a whole pitch, we're kind of normally looking at somewhere in an established pitch. We're probably going to be looking at somewhere between 60 to 80 tons of material, which is probably going to cost you somewhere in the region of £3,000. So it's not an application that we're going to be doing very routinely unless you've got particular problems with your pitch. But to put it into context, 100 tons of top dressing across a full-size pitch equates to about 0.5 centimetre of material. So it might sound like a huge amount of material, but by the time it's been applied and worked into the surface using a brush or a drag mat, it actually doesn't equate to much. So if you've got quite a bobbly surface, if you've got a pitch that's quite clayey and gets really soft in the winter, it might be something that you want to consider, but it is costly, and that's mainly just because the cost of sand is pretty high. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, and then restoring grass cover. So pointing out the obvious, if we've got worn areas or we've done scarification or we're trying to introduce some better population of desirable grasses like we spoke about earlier, one of the best ways of doing that in an established pitch is to use a disc seeder. It basically drills the seed to the ideal depths and creates these kind of slots that you can see at the top. And the reason why that is so useful is that basically it introduces the grass seed at the perfect depth for germination. It's not just banging a load of grass seed on top and feeding the birds and hoping for the best. It's getting it into the ground. And the other good thing with that as well, you probably remember the drought summer we had in 2018. Well, I saw pitches that were kind of seeded in the spring, and because we had no rainfall, the seed just sat there. And actually in September, when we started to get some decent rainfall again, suddenly they got all this nice new germinating grass coming through. So the other benefit with disc seeding is that, unlike the other forms of seeding, you don't generally tend to lose it to feeding the birds or being kicked out through play or whatever it might be. And generally speaking, a decent overseeding rate would be about 35 grams a square metre, which equates to about 10 to 12, 20 kilograms of perennial ryegrass seed for a full-size pitch. If budgets are limited, you can obviously concentrate on central areas and sort of try and introduce that through the worst areas, and reduce the quantity of grass seed appropriately. Next slide, please, Nick. And then the growing. So what I normally, in the grassroots environment, what I call to be the high risk window is doing your seeding between May and August if you don't have access to irrigation, because it becomes a bit of a toss of the coin as to how kind Mother Nature is, essentially. So if you are in a grassroots environment where you have end of season tournaments or your season goes on quite late, it can be more of a low risk solution to try and do your seeding in what I call half rate. So doing half of it in the spring and half of it in the autumn. And then that way, if for instance, like last year where we had a drought in April and May, If you don't get the weather to help you establish your pitch, you're not using all of your grass seed for that season in that one particular hit. So spring and autumn are the best times to get your grass seed in the ground. Autumn tends to be more helpful in terms of natural rainfall. So something to consider. It's something that we often recommend to local authority sites, where often they don't do their renovations till kind of mid-May, and sometimes it's a little bit late in the day. So if you haven't got access to irrigation, it's one of the things that you might want to think about. You might get lucky and you might get a really wet May and you'll be fine. But we normally kind of say that mid-May to kind of August window is what we consider to be high risk. Worthwhile as well, and I obviously spoke about that disc seeding already. If you decide not to do scarification for budgetary reasons or whatever it might be, you can do your disc seeding a couple of weeks before the season actually finishes, because it's drilling the seed into the soil. It's not going to really be affected by play. So if you're not going to be scarifying and kind of going through that top layer of your pitch, that can buy you a couple of weeks while the grass seed is actually starting to germinate and chip. So it's one of the things that you could consider if you're kind of a little bit up against it time-wise. Like I said, given the right conditions, perennial ryegrass will normally kind of germinate 7 to 14 days. Ideally, you want to try and apply a pre-seeding fertiliser that's reasonably balanced. If you're only able to kind of get one application of fertiliser on a year, a kind of a nice steady analysis would be like an 18-5-18. So that's 18% nitrogen, 5% phosphorus and 18% potassium. The phosphorus really is what helps you to get your grass plant germinating and going in its very young stages, and the potassium helps with the root development, and the nitrogen is what helps it to grow and establish. And you normally want to leave your grass height before mowing, and this is why I've mentioned about doing that preparation work, is that what you don't really want is all your established grass that's already left being at sort of 60 mil by the time your new grass is ready for a cut. So if you can get the old stuff down to kind of 15 or 20 and you get your new stuff in and the whole lot's at about 40 millimeters by the time you give it its first cut, normally the new stuff will be about strong enough and it won't be getting kind of out competed by the older grasses that you might have left in the pitch. So generally speaking, 40 mil when it's in its early days, and really particularly if you're experiencing dryish conditions, you really want to try and keep the grass height as high as you can during the close season, and not be tempted to kind of take it down too early. 35 to 40 millimeters in the close season, if the pitches aren't in use particularly, is absolutely fine. And then taking it down very gradually, kind of a third of the grass leaf at a time, down to playing height when your season starts. And it's really helpful as well to alternate the direction of cut. So if you're growing a pitch in from scratch, changing the direction of cut helps it to tiller in and thicken up. So if you haven't got too tight turning circles, then you can consider mowing up and down, mowing diagonally, mowing across, and it will all help to encourage the grass to thicken up. And those two images there are taken about 5 weeks apart. Next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, and the last one is weed control. So there are two schools of thought with this. There is the one of, I'm going to whack my weeds before I do my overseeding. The one problem with that is a lot of the weeds might not have emerged in April. The other problem is that quite often selective herbicides have what I call a cooling off period before grass seed should be sown. So quite often they recommend 6 to 8 weeks gap prior to seeding or after seeding. So if you've got a contractor that does weed control for you have a chat with them and see what product they're using. And basically you can Google that product and you'll get a product label that will give you the instructions, and it will say on there, you need to allow this much time between applying this and overseeding, or it will say, please allow this much time after overseeding before you spray for weeds. So in an ideal world, if your pitch isn't too infested with weeds when you come in to do your seeding, you probably want to try and do it afterwards. And if you're doing your seeding in kind of early to mid-April, then June is probably a good time to be thinking about doing a weed control, providing your pitches aren't under drought conditions. If your pitches are under drought conditions, the weeds will be under drought conditions and they shut down pretty quickly, and they won't take the selective herbicide up very well. So you want to try and make sure that the weeds are being treated when the grass is actively growing to get good control, and then also making sure that the herbicide that the contractor is using treats the weeds that you've got on site. It sounds silly, but there are quite a few on the market that don't treat clover. So the better quality systemic selective herbicides should give control of clover as well. So what we don't want to see really is you shift all your dandelions and your plantains and all of the big stuff, and then you've still got loads of clover population that's kind of smothering your grass. So you can follow that guidance. And again, on the Hive Learning platform, you can get more information on all of these maintenance practices that I've mentioned very quickly. I apologise for running over slightly, but it's a lot of information that we've had to get through. And I think that draws it to a close. Nick, please, you want to go to the last slide? Yes, there you go. So there's the joining details for the Hive Learning groundskeeping community, and like I said, you can go to the technical resources area, click on see all, and that will give you all of the maintenance practices that I've spoken about this evening, all the renovation practices, and there are videos that take you through every one of those renovation practices as well. Always feel free to pick up the phone and give me a ring, drop me an email, any questions. That's what I'm here for. But that's a really good resource as well, and it gives you guidance on everything from kind of sourcing a contractor to what should I be looking for in a sports turf contractor. And the one thing that I would say is if you're planning end of season renovation works and you haven't got a contractor booked in, try and get it done ASAP, because their slots book up very, very quickly, because everybody's trying to get the same work done at the same time. So I think that's it from me, Nick, apart from questions.
Thanks, Julian. Really useful. Is there any questions that have come out of that sort of section around end of season renovations? I appreciate there's a lot of information there, a lot of detail in that, which we'll obviously share in the slides. What I would certainly encourage everyone to do, and I think just looking at the sign-ups tonight, there's quite a few that are yet to be on the online community. The feedback we've had from Essex groundskeepers across the county has been a really, really valuable resource, not only for the information they've got on there, but as Julian said, lots of people sharing good practice, top tips. We've had this problem, how have you solved it? And there's just a variety of answers that come back. Try this, try that. We've used this contractor, they were really good. So I would really, really encourage people, those that aren't on there yet, to take that as an action from tonight and get yourself on there. There's lots of Essex groundskeepers already on there, so there's already an existing community in Essex, but further afield there's people facing the same challenges as well, so really encourage people to get on there to be part of that community. Any questions that have come out before we bring it to a close?
There must be. It's who's going to be the brave one to put their hand up and ask a question. Normally opens the floodgates. Somebody, surely. I can see grinning faces. Nobody. I must have done too good a job.
No. Sorry, where's that Essex groundkeepers thing again, Nick? Where was it on?
It's hosted on Hive, which is a platform.
Hive, right? Okay, yeah, I think I've seen that. Yeah,
I'll send a link out for how to sign up to that, as well as a follow-up email. So there's loads of different information on there, Paul.
Okay, tough.
Okay. It's a Monday night and everyone's keen to just get off. Watch EastEnders must be starting soon. Okay. If there's nothing else, we will let you have the rest of your evening. So thanks once again. Thanks to Julian for coming on tonight and taking us through the presentation. Hope you found it useful. Tom's put his hand up. He doesn't want to get away for EastEnders. Go on, Tom.
Good man, Tom. You're on mute.
Unmute yourself, Tom.
Is that right? Can you hear
That's
me?
it.
Yeah.
I can hear you, Tom.
Oh, sorry. Good evening. Sorry. Just a quick question. Wormcast. What's the best solution for wormcast? Because at the moment, every time I look online and I ask people about all these companies that, what sort of is the best way of getting rid of wormcast, and there is not the sort of spray equipment or the equipment that we used to have. What's your best? What's the best?
So yes, carbendazim, the chemical that we used to be able to spray to kind of suppress worms, was banned in, I think it was 2017 now. So it's really a combination. It's really a combination of things now in terms of the approach. So like I said, having an understanding of the pH of your soil can be a good starting point, because generally speaking, worms don't like acidic soils, but they very much like alkaline soils. They feed on leaf litter and organic matter. So as I kind of said, the scarification can be a good process to kind of remove some of that material that they feed on. Very difficult in a grassroots environment, I appreciate, but collecting grass clippings can help to reduce, again, their food source. And then in terms of dispersing the worm casts, it's really trying to pick a dry, windy day when the casts are a little bit firmer and you can kind of disperse them with a brush. One of the best tools out there that we recommend very routinely in PitchPower reports is what we call a combination grooming tool, or it might be more commonly known as a quadruplay, that comes with kind of a rake, a brush, and a slitter, and they're really good bits of kit to disperse worm casts. But unfortunately, there isn't kind of the silver bullet solution with worm casts anymore. There are some granular and liquid treatments out there called saponins that can help to provide some control, but they're not actually approved for wormcast treatment. So it's a headache across the industry at the moment, and it's probably amongst the single biggest headaches. But it's what in the industry we kind of call as an integrated pest management approach now. So it's kind of a combination of good maintenance practices and sort of trying to have a good idea of where your pitch and your soil is at.
Yeah. Okay, appreciate your help on that anyway. And
I wish I had a magic wand and could, could give you a.
Wish I had as well. Yeah, no, thanks, Paul.
Okay. Any further questions? No. Okay. So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again to Julian. Thanks to everyone for giving up their time this evening to join us. Hopefully it was useful. A lot of information. So I will follow up and send everyone that signed up an email with the message in the chat. I'll put them into the email as well. We'll pop it onto YouTube as well, our Essex FA YouTube channel, the recording. So if you want to refer back to it at any time, you can. And we'll hope to do some more of these in the future. Certainly, kind of, you probably get yourself onto the Hive community if you're not on there, because that will, I think, be a really valuable resource for all of you involved in grass pitch maintenance moving forward. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.